Huh, guess I am really doing this, huh? Hey there guys, Noah here, and welcome back to another Vanguard discussion video, or more accurately, a Vanguard review? Yep, this time I'm actually going to sit down and discuss and review How to Win Cardfight Tournaments by Commander Jaime. Big shout out to him for, I don't know if you would consider this a sponsor because he posted up on my community tab and he said, hey, go for it, go for the review, and all of that. So I'm like, okay, sure, I'll do the full review. And let me start by saying that I'm going to completely ignore all of the comments, all of the backlash that have come from this, because let's just start with that for a moment, because you have to give this man at least a little bit of credit. He took a lot of time, patience, and effort to actually make this book. And for a lot of people who are just starting into getting competitive Vanguard for Springfest, or maybe they're thinking even further down the line with BCS season coming up, you know, this is a very invaluable tool, and not just for the beginner player either. I feel like there is some neat things you could probably get from this if you're an experienced player like I am, seeing how I've been playing this game for 10 years at this point. I was more than less curious to see if this had any useful information for me, even though I am a veteran. Now keep in mind, you can get this book for relatively cheap on Amazon, so if you don't have it yet, I'll leave it a link in the description below if you're curious. But definitely give this man a lot of credit, because oh my god, this guy really went above and beyond. Like, when you sit there and you think about it, I don't remember the last time that we've had an unofficial product like this be so fucking useful. Like, I'm not even kidding. But with that being said, this is my review on Commander Jaime's book, How to Win Cardfight Tournaments, and some other subtext in between. Let's get started. So let's start off with the big elephant in the room with this book, because I feel like this is something, considering how negative I tend to be on my channel, I figure, you know what, let me get the negativity out of the way first, and then talk about what's actually good about this book. So, the major complaint that this book in general has is the blatant advertisements for Commander Jaime's channel. What do I mean by this? Well, throughout the entire book, he'll mention his personal experience and his, you know, his channel, his meta fight and, you know, like, things and all that. And while that can be useful depending on the person, it is kind of annoying and a little distracting in this book when you're trying to actually just learn the game at least a somewhat competitive level. And unfortunately, it kind of takes away from the overall value of this book a bit. I'm sorry to say that, but it's honestly true. Like, you can't go through one section without him mentioning a personal experience in his own, like, competitive career. And if this was going to be a autobiography of his actual journey to success, that would be one thing. But this is supposed to be a guide that covers the entirety of Cardfight Vanguard and how to be, you know, quote-unquote competitive, which is another massive issue that I'll have with this book. This book in general, without any further context, is very niche. It already in a niche card game that, let's be honest, has had better years. Quite honestly, while the book in itself and the information that's provided is actually very helpful, it doesn't take away from the fact that there's only a handful of people who will actually sit here and read this. Either people who are already knee-deep and invested into Cardfight Vanguard but want to actually do well in tournaments like me, or people who are just starting out and want to get the full gist and have a better idea of how to do it. And the sad part is, while I would say that videos out there probably do a much better job, this book is actually not terrible in that regard. Ultimately, it's kind of a mixed bag, but truth be told, it does depend on your mindset. If you can just straight up ignore most of the blatant advertisements and just take things at face value, then sure, I think this does help out a lot. The other massive complaint that I'll have personally is the lack of clan diversity. Like, specifically, throughout the entire book, we see a lot of examples for Aquaforce, Granblue, just a lot of Melonica and Storkea decks in general, but barely any examples outside of that in particular. You know, the occasional Denial Griffin or Raging Ford mentioned here and there throughout the book, And some strategies that are currently outdated, I get it, you really couldn't account for a badness like this when you're making a book like this, but still, it's just little noteworthy things, and you can tell he really did put a lot of effort into making sure that the information was at least somewhat accurate, at least according to the current metagame at the time of this recording. But even still, it is just something that to keep in mind of. So, with that being said, what does this book actually succeed at doing? What this book actually does provide is give you a lot of very unique insight into how to actually do well at events or just getting better at the game in general. From the most basic details to the more intricate levels of competitive play, you'll find what you need in this book in general, and everything is divided into bite-sized chunks, making it a lot easier for the average person to read. Considering that most card game players don't even read their own goddamn cards, this is actually very surprisingly useful, and I get the feeling that Commander Jaime did this with that intention in mind. Overall, the book is very useful, being able to go into from learning how to build a deck, to learning how to actually play, to preparing for an event in general. You'll find everything you could possibly need, and then some in this one book. Now, I will say again, I should emphasize this, I personally would not sit through the entire book and read through it in one session. I would highly recommend dividing it into different chunks and making it so that way you don't sit there and feel like it's an absolute grind, because this book is actually surprisingly long, capping out at well over 240 pages. Like, Jesus Christ. Or rather, I'm going through the book right now, and it's about like 240 pages, and that's still a lot of very useful information. But man, like, the amount of content that's put into this small little book is actually impressive. I personally bought the damn thing on paperback because, well, I wanted to actually own it because, knowing how digital, media actually works nowadays, yeah, I'd rather have the actual hard copy. So if you know somebody in your locals who actually bought the book, ask if you can borrow it. At least while you're there and you're just, in between rounds and stuff in your tournaments or whatnot, because I feel like to fully grasp whether or not it's worth your investment, I would recommend just having someone let you borrow it just to read a couple pages or so, just to see if this is actually worth your time. Not to say that it wouldn't be, quite honestly, because I feel like most players who actually want to play competitively should actually buy this book in general and actually read through it at least once. Because trust me, this book, even despite me being a veteran player who's been playing the game for well over 10 years at this point, man, this actually provided a lot of very unique insight, and honestly, I can't get enough of this. Like, truth be told, I know I may have had a lot of negative opinions going into this, but you have to remember, this was made by one person, at least as far as I can tell. And, you have to give the man a lot of credit. I know I said that from the very beginning of this review, but I don't think words can really express the level of appreciation I have for something like this. This is definitely something that you can definitely go back and review at least once or twice, going into a major event or whatnot, just to refresh your mind on how to do certain things, because you'd be surprised how much you'll tend to forget if you just read the book once. Personally, I tend to read it at least another time, just so that way I fully understand the content that's actually in here and just maybe get a little bit of better insight overall, because trust me, it actually did help. Like, for example, trying out new things was definitely one thing that I admittedly was very hesitant with, as in terms of actually, building decks and actually learning something from scratch. But then I decided, you know what, let me give that a try and actually pick up a Messiah deck completely from scratch. Well, not completely from scratch. I've had the pieces for a while, but I ended up playing it on CFA, and then, long story short, well, now I have the deck fully sweeped up and ready to go for Springfest, because, well, this deck is very consistent. I want to give a big shout out to Commander Jaime for making this entire book overall, and I have to say, I was hesitant at first, sure, but I ultimately sat there and said, you know what, fuck it, I'm hyped for this, because this is something that I don't see a lot of other card games actually do, and a lot of, people, as much crap as you'll give him, you at least have to commend him on actually making this in the first place. I don't know a single person who would have actually made this otherwise, But you can tell this man had a lot of passion and a lot of thought and, you know, ideas that he wanted to put into one book for the whole world to see. And I gotta say, this was very impressive. So, if you guys want to pick this up, again, I will leave a link in the description below to the Amazon page where you can go and purchase this. I'd highly recommend, if you want to support this even further, to definitely buy this on paperback because, man, this guy deserves a lot of credit. This was well worth the money that I spent on this book overall. So, let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Do you think this was useful to you, or do you think that this was just not ideal? I'm kind of curious because it tends to seem to be a very mixed bag, and I'm more or less curious about your guys' thoughts in general. So until next time, whatever that will be, this is Noah, and I'll catch you guys later. Bye, everyone.